Alright, you guys, I'm just setting you up here in the tripod, and we are going to do a build series here. Now, I'm going to try and show this to you guys as well as I possibly can, given the circumstances, but we're in tight quarters. I don't have a lot of space, I don't have a lot of money, and I don't have a lot of time. So, we are going to try our best to make this happen. Now, if I could put this up here, maybe you guys can see a little bit better, but this looks like it's going to be perfect. So I'm just going to pull my tripod over so that's directly over above my little work area here. And I'm going to start to lay out a few things. Now, this is what I laid out my P51 on. Now, you might think that you have to do this exactly. Just kidding. Note the P51, if you notice, is black plastic. And come to think of it, it might not even make it up. Oh wait, it did. It's up a long time ago, guys. You guys can come and see it. I laid out a bunch of different wings so far, but there have been a couple of them that I really liked in terms of their flying characteristics and made it to the next stage. See, because what I'm trying to build here is an indoor 3D aircraft. So what I don't want is something that I have to take outdoors, either because it's too fast or because it has too big of a turning circle. Now, here's the problem with that. If I make it really fast on a dime, it'll turn. That's a problem. It means that I have a major issue. And the issue, believe it or not, is really straightforward. The issue becomes, no beginner would want that. And I don't really want to make something that's absolutely impractical for anybody else to fly. I could make a very advanced 3D aircraft. In fact, if you continue to watch this channel, you will see that I have all that up here. I have beginner aircraft, I have all kinds. Now, one of the wings that I've shown you guys, the bottom wing for my biplane, looks very much, and I do mean very much, like a P-47 wing. And when I tested that one on its own, I found that it was absolutely amazing. Now, you'll notice that I didn't cut these out evenly. They're not perfect. So what you're going to do is you're going to start, whenever you cut something by hand, you'll always find there's one slightly smaller and one slightly bigger. You actually want one slightly bigger on purpose, and I'm going to show you why. So now, I'm going to decide that I want my wing shape very particular, guys. I want my wing tips a little out to the front. So this is all going to happen without so much as a drawing. There. Now I've made myself a wingtip. You see that? This is actually going to be a nice wing for a variety of reasons. One, I left myself a little edge here, so I have a little upturn. You might think that's good. It's not. I'm actually going to round this off a little bit and kind of make my own version of a P-47 here. But there's going to be a few slight differences from a traditional P-47 to mine. So, now that I have this generally sorted out, I am also going to just give this a little trim because I didn't see it was straight and I wanted it to be pretty straight. Not perfectly. I actually want a slight angle this way. Now, this is a big wing, and I don't have to use one this big, but it has its moment forward. So, when you make a wing, you're going to want to keep the front portion of that wing, that is the lift portion, no more than a third of the way back. So when you look at this, I'm going to be bending it like this, and like this, and like this, gently, guys, till I round this out. And I don't want it to be squared off. I want it actually to be pretty rounded. So I'm going to take this with just with my finger. There are other ways to do this. I could take it on the tripod, for example, which is a nice round tube, and just roll it against the tripod until it helps me get my shape like that. And that's a nice way to do it because you get a nice even shape. So now we have that. And you might think, well, geez, Keith, why would you do that? Well, now I have the larger one. Don't forget, I started with this smaller one, okay? This is how you keep your wings symmetrical. Now, I'm not necessarily happy with this wing just yet. And the reason is really simple. on one of these wings, it generally will come back a little farther than this. And so I'm going to show you what I'm going to do about that. I'm going to rough out the shape of the wing that I want, like this. So now I actually have the wing running the shape that I want. I want this back edge to taper pretty steadily out until it gets to the maximum width. And it shouldn't do that at the halfway point. It should do that just about here, guys, which is really nice. It gives me a little run here. Also, I'm going to trim this back edge because if you could take a look at this, if this were the straight body, this angle means that the wing will be cambered out, pointed out. That's good. For a P-47, that's excellent. So we're going to leave that like that. It's been done on purpose. Now, I have a shape that I like, and I've decided that this is going to be my wing. Only, I don't necessarily want this to be this rough. So I'm just going to smooth this out real careful. Now I'm going to come around here, and I'm going to smooth this one out real careful, using as little material off as I can make it. And now I'm just going to make it like that. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you want, you can sand this edge. You don't have to, guys. A Spitfire is also a very similar wing to this, guys. So now we're going to take this, and I'm going to place this. You'll notice that I left a little tiny up lip. I'm going to make sure you can see it here, hopefully. See this little lip? There's a little bit of that lip there. It actually encourages this whole thing to sit up. And you're going to see we're going to trim that off just a little, because we really don't need it. But I also want to give the wing a slight angle back. Now, you might say, well, what if I don't get the angles quite correct? What I will say to you is make the smallest angle you possibly can on both wings. Here's what you do. You make one angle, and now we could say we've successfully created that angle. Easily and quickly, because all we're going to do is take these two, put them together, trim it out as tight as I can. Make sure to hold this securely, and if you're worried about that at all, it's actually a little easier to get double-sided tape and do it that way, but I didn't want to do it because I would have to go get some double-sided tape, which I have here. I'd have to find it. It would take me minutes of time to set it up in the first place. When I cut at home, normally when I do this on my own, I actually do it with the double-sided tape. Sometimes, and sometimes I don't. And the reason is really simple. There are times when I want the double-sided tape, and then there are times when I just do it freehand because I just don't bother to go get it. So this is going to be one of those times. And what we're going to do is we're going to put these wings together perfectly. And I mean perfectly. I'm going to look them up and down. I'm going to examine every single edge and angle. And this is where having it a little different comes into play. What I mean by that is, if you really want it perfect, and you really, really want it perfect, you're going to line up these edges perfect. You're going to very carefully hold them there. The problem is it's really easy to have this move on you, and you don't want that. You want the shape precise. Now on this side, it's got this little trim that needs to come off of here. So we're just going to hold my template up against it. And what you do is you basically, I've done this lots of times too. When I'm first designing a wing, guys, I highly recommend this. What you do is you actually take one attempt at making the wing you want, and then make a second attempt at making the wing you want, and make those attempts slightly different so that you go out of your way to have a slightly different profile. And once you're done that, and you have a slightly different profile on each one, you choose the one that you like. In this case, I like this profile. I'm happy with my wingtips. I'm happy with the trailing edge. I'm going to have lots of room here for ailerons. I could even leave room for flaps, but I'm not going to need it. This is going to be a great design. So I'm going to take it against my tripod, and I'm going to bend it just like I showed you, and kind of hold it in place and smooth that front edge. Now I'm going to take the back, and I'm going to place it against the floor. I'm going to take a hard object, like a lighter is a good object with a little metal edge, and I'm going to run it along this edge, guys. Why? Because we want that back edge to be as smooth as possible and as sharp as possible. The front, we don't actually need to do it. We just need to bend it in and get the right shape for our wing. So, we're not done yet, but this is a lot of the wing done already, and we've only been going for a few minutes. So I'm going to walk you through this build very carefully, and I'm going to start this by hand, but I'm going to start it by looking at the other wing, guys. So I'm going to compare these two wings just like this. And then I'm going to look, and I'm going to compare the middle of my incident to this. And I'm just going to walk along the tip until I see where the bend point is here. And it's right out to the tip, if you see that. So I'm going to do the same thing, only now I need to be very careful to make sure that I'm doing it correctly. I don't want to have it flipped over this way and do the wrong edge, the wrong direction, because we'll make it weaker later if we do that. And I don't want to do that. So now I'm being very careful. I'm using my thumb as a template and just moving my thumb equally along the line. Now I'm going to break that line in half, meaning I'm going to go half the distance from where I made my first bend and make a second one right there. Okay, now I'm going to run it across my tripod base because it's nice and round and smooth. But I've done this many times, guys, just with my fingers. In fact, all the ones so far I just did with my fingers, but I want this one to be perfect. So I'm going to take my lighter, and once again, I'm going to go over this edge. Now you could use other things for this. You could use this pair of scissors, but I really like the nice soft rounded edge here, guys. It works very well. And you can really put pressure where you want it and put it nice and tight. I'm doing this a couple times so you can see it needs to be tight. And look at the difference. You get a nice thin edge here and a nice thicker edge here, okay? And that is actually a good thing too for the trailing edge of the wing. You want the wind to come off there nice. So now we have our two sections here. Now in this video, we're just going to show you guys how to create the wing. And then we're going to show you what we're going to do with the garbage, which is going to be pretty impressive because I'm going to make a little biplane out of that. Now, I've got this piece here, and I've gone out of my way to cut these in a very particular place. So, I'm going to show you why in a minute. Now, at this point, we need to decide what kind of P47 do we want. Am I going to make it a 2-channel? Am I going to make it a 3-channel? Am I going to make it a 4-channel? All those things come to mind. Now, if the company that offered to sponsor me was serious, I will be able to pump out these for you guys very quickly because I do know what I'm doing. Now, what I want to do here is I'm just going to take a look at this. Now, I want to see the middle of this, and it needs to be pretty precise. So at this point, we're going to introduce some actual tools to our job. Up until now, we've just done this by eye. Up until now, there's been no measuring of any kind. So we're just going to look and see what size our wing is. Now keep in mind, I told you that the other wing was just under 12 inches, guys. And look at that. We got exactly 12 inches, guys. Isn't that great? Oh no, it's just under, just like the other wing. When I tell you the other one's just under 12 inches and you worry about, oh, well, I didn't give me a template. I gave you the diameter, and the reason I did is because when you build the biggest one you could build out of these boxes, that's what you get, a 12-inch wingspan. Now, if you look at a P47, it has a very unique shape, and I could copy that, but I don't have to. So let's take a look at a measurement here. We're going to see that I have 3 inches here. I'm actually going to hold this down and mark it at the 3-inch mark, guys. Now, I'm going to make a little trim with the goal of leaving myself exactly 3 inches. But I want to leave enough to do the other end too because I want to make this a straight line. And it really didn't look like it was to me. Now I'm going to take a look at the back line and I'm going to make it as straight as I can. Now this does not have to be perfect, you guys. But the closer it is to perfect, the better it'll be. So a good way to do this is to compare it to a square flow tile. And if you look, and you can see that it's pretty close to square. I've got pretty much the same distance all the way along. I can put it up against a straight line in both cases and see that I have actually done a good job. So now that we know this, we know it's 3 inches long. We're going to take another measure and we're just going to make sure, and you can see I was correct, it's 3 inches long. So that means we can mark 1.5 inches as our middle. We're going to go right up to the top of it. We're going to mark 1.5 inches right here. And you may wonder why we're doing that. And I will tell you that when we install this onto the aircraft, we're going to want to know where that center mark is. And we're going to cover that center mark completely and utterly with the spar of the aircraft. So now that we have our halfway mark made, we're going to do something unexpected. we are going to fold this in half right along this line. And in fact, I want to work it back and forth if need be to make sure that it folds right perfectly along this mark, like that. And now when you fold it up, you're going to look at the angles and you're going to make sure that it's straight, that these two ends are exactly perfect, and you're going to press it down. Not so much. You're just going to relax, press down the tips, because we're about to make tips out of these. So a P47 has a nice rounded tail, and I have a very particular shape that I have in mind that I'd like to achieve. Because a P47 has very particular wingtips, as you can see. The wingtip is forward of that point, and I'm going to make one that's very similar, guys. So these don't have to be perfect, but you'll notice it's got a very similar profile, but it's big. And I'm going to make my aileron right here. So I'm going to use my scissor as a flat edge, you might think, and I could. In fact, I'm actually going to. And I'm going to use it to mark the place that I want this aileron to start. And what I want to do is go right from this little edge. I don't know if you guys can see that. What I want to do is go right from this edge to this edge. So again, I'm going to mark this only because it gives me a reference point visually. And this stuff will wipe off after with just a little bit of water. So I'm going to go out of my way to try and break this at that spot. And you might wonder how to do that, because it doesn't seem to want to work that way. It doesn't seem to want to do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this up against a flat surface, guys. A wall will do just fine. And I'm going to mark with the edge of my scissors. So I'm just going to take the edge of my scissors. I'm going to put it like this. Now, I can't really do it on the floor, guys, or I would. And then I'm just going to run it across. And you see that? I've made a perfect line here. And look how neat that came out, guys. Now you can do this for yourselves, and it's quite easy to do. So all I've done is make a line, and I've rolled it across. Now we have a pretty equal aileron. We're not going to mess with it more than that right now, but that is our tail at this point. Now, I'm going to take another piece, because we're not done yet, and we need one more tail surface to make this wing complete. Now you may say to me, Keith, you can't just throw this together. You got to test this. I will say to you that a P-47 is one of the most tested aircraft in the world. It has done its duty, and it proved itself many, many times. Don't tell me it's not a proven design, because I am a great inventor. I am a copycat. What that means is this is a great design, and I actually want a very particular type of design for you guys. I know that might seem strange, but it's absolutely true. And what I really want is an excellent design for you guys. I don't want just an average design, and I can't make one. Heck no. I got that. I got some great designs up on my channel, and they work awesome. But a lot of people like to have an original design. And I don't have a problem with providing one. In fact, I'm about to. So here's how this works. This is going to go on the bottom of the carbon fiber scar. And this is going to go on the top, but it's only going to be glued from where the aileron is over. So again, I'm just going to make myself an aileron by folding it. And look at that. Right away, it folds. It's nice. Now, when we make this RC, you'll see that this will not be the only thing that we do. We're actually going to cut this off completely and then reattach it with some glue gun glue and some tape. Or just some glue gun glue if the glue gun glue comes out strong enough. Now, this is not the prettiest tail in the world, guys. This is not ideal, but this is partly to show you that you can just make it and it'll just work within a certain range of motion. So, one of the things we need to take care of is when you look at it this way, I need to decide where I want this to sit. If I make it sit here, which is basically how I'm going to do it, this will be able to come all the way up without interfering with the tail. Okay, but because it's going to be mounted directly up against a rod, if I don't trim the bottom, it's going to be a bit of a pain, and you don't have to trim it by much. Look at the little gap here. There's very little gap, but now we're just making it so that it runs smoothly. Now, we have one more issue to contend with. The angle that I trim this will determine the angle that this sits on, and if you notice, it's on a weird angle. I don't like it. So now, I'm going to trim this aileron just a touch more because I know I'm about to turn this just a little down. And I've made this a flat angle, a much flatter angle now, just by trimming it. So now I set it in place and see if I like the look of it. And in fact, I quite do. It's got a good look. No matter how I set it up, I like the look of this. It's actually going to be sitting right about here, guys. You might think, but it won't. It'll actually be all the way forward of this so that this can act completely. It also gives the tail a lot more authority, guys, to have it be able to full swing over without worrying about interfering with this. And as you can see, my little gap is here and present. So now we have all three. Now, let's talk about the size of the control surfaces, because at this point, I'm going to want to figure out the length of my control surfaces. Now, I already know roughly where I want these to start and end, and it's going to be based on logic. On the inside of the wing, I want some aileron, and I want some aileron on the outside of the wing. So I'm actually going to make them come right out to the edge of the wing here, and I'm going to want them to sit here and top out right here. So now I have a good idea of where I want these to sit. Now, generally what I will do at this point is I'll cut it out, measure the distance from here to here, mark this one to make it exactly the same, and then cut one out, fold it over, and put it in place when I cut it to make sure that I get the exact same size. Now what you do is, just like you did with this lower surface, you're going to trim just a little bit in a straight line off each edge so that it fits and has a little bit of leeway room on either side. You want a little tiny gap, just like you saw here. I don't want it directly up against this or it's going to rub. I want it sitting just above with a little gap so that when this turns, it's not interfering. So that's how you make your control surfaces, and that is how you set up a design for a wing. Now, this is a very quick design, you might think, but I've already taken my time and built this one. Engineers took their time and designed this one during World War II, guys. In fact, just before it. And the P-47 was a great aircraft. It flies incredibly. We're also going to put a couple of VGs on the wing at a later date, but this is going to be our P-47 build video series. I will show you step by step how to build this aircraft and how to turn it into a micro flyer that is a gem. At this point, I've tried so many different types of wings, and I decided on this one because of its relatively tame flying characteristics. It flies very, very well. I just want to show it to you from pretty much every angle here. I know sometimes on camera it doesn't always show up so well. And because all this has been thoroughly tested, we know that it'll work. We know that this is a good wing. And I know that this much wing surface is more than enough surface area for you to make this fly. In fact, we could make this fly without the VGs. But it might be a little fast for an indoor flyer, guys. Now, the length of the spar comes into question as well. And basically, I'm just going to lay this out like this. I really like to have enough room, that I have enough room to mount to the point on the spar at the rear that I want, and I want enough room to make a tail. This angle should be correct. You also want to check the distances to these. When you set this up, you can check the distances to these and make sure both are exactly the same. You can check your widths, check everything when you build it. But for now, the best thing to do is lay it out and mock it up. So I'm going to say that I want my main shaft, I like to leave myself a full 2 inches out in front, because the farther out this point is from the tip of the wing, the more effect it has when you weight it to help the CG. The shorter a distance the tail is, the less it impacts and makes it want to be tail heavy. If you make this moment too long, this section, say you made it this long and you put your tail back here, you're going to have a really hard time CGing this aircraft unless you put a really big long section out here. But I find with 2 inches out front, you have more than enough room to mount your motor, and then you have a nice little gap, and that turns out to be a good thing, but you don't need any more than that. So I want to look back here, and I want to see that to the place that I want to mount this with the proportions I want means I could build this whole thing on an 8-inch rod. But because it is a 12-inch aircraft, I actually want it to sit just about like that. And most of these are 8.5 to 9 inches that I make the rod. I'm going to make this one 8.5 inches, and that'll be sweet. Anyway, that's about it for this video, guys. I'm going to cut it here, and give me a second. This one's already 25 minutes. I'm sorry about the length, but each one of these is an aircraft. I've already shown you in the other videos how to go about the rest of this, which means all you need to do is cut your tube to length and install your pieces, and you will have a sick little aircraft. Now, this is going to roll fairly well because it has a nice big surface area. Don't get scared and put a really small surface area on this. It's a really wide wing, and it needs good control surfaces to roll over well. But it's also a bit bigger proportionally than a P-47, and it will fly great. That being said, it's going to be able to lift lots of weight, which means you can make this a 3-channel. Now, if I didn't like the proportions, I could always just take a quick trim off this inner line, put them together again, match it up, and trim it out until I'm happy with the shape. In fact, I might just do that because this is looking pretty big. I might also, and could also, make a bigger tail, but in fact, I'm not going to need to. What I am might likely to do is trim down this wing, and I think I'm going to keep it about this wide. So let me take a look before we cut out. Okay, we are looking at 3-inch depth here, literally just under 3 inches. So I'm thinking at that point I'm going to change my mind, and I'm just going to leave it like this because this is perfect. It's why I made it like this, guys. It's actually a really good design. It'll have tons of lift, tons of control authority. Keep in mind, if I cut some of this off, my ailerons have to be further up the wing. I don't want that. I actually want big ailerons, and I want the whole thing to be a very particular size because it works better that way. And I'm trying to build for you a beginner aircraft. Now, I've built already one of these wings and tested it, and it flew absolutely excellent. Anybody who ever says they built the P-47 that didn't fly well, they did it wrong. It is one of those aircraft, and it is also a fighter plane, which means it's meant for turning. It's meant for maneuvering, and that is good because we are going to be doing some turning with it. And you want a fairly quick roll rate. You want to be able to turn in quickly and pull back hard, which is why you need a nice big surface here, not too crazy big, but big enough to be effective so that when I pull back on that rudder, it'll actually climb or dive as I ask it to. And I would need to have enough control authority that I can flip it over backwards, literally. Because if I'm flying down the hall this way, I want to have enough authority that I can snap it up backwards and fly back the other way. And that way, if you're in a tight hallway and you want to fly it, you can fly it back and forth up and down that hallway without ever actually turning around with your ailerons. You can do it all with your elevator, believe it or not. In addition, this aircraft makes enough lift that when you put on the throttle, you'll climb. When you take off the throttle, you'll dive. So if you add throttle and pull back, you will turn over fast and hard. If you just pull back, you'll climb. So it's a really nice layout. It's got a lot of benefits, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. That being said, I can't wait to share with you guys what's coming, because out of the garbage of this, in the next video, you're going to see that I am going to build a biplane, guys, and you're going to love it. Keith out.